you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
I'm Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. The Chris Voss Show. I'll let her do it. There you go. I did it for 14 years, and now she does it, and sometimes I forget. I kind of like doing it. It's kind of fun. There you go. But, after 14 years, I had to hang up the hat and leave it to the opera singer who knows what she's doing, and I certainly don't. We have an amazing gentleman on the show we're going to be talking to today. His name is Vernon Oakes. He's an Everything Cooperative general partner. We're going to be talking about his business, what he does, his radio show, his podcast, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll get into it. He hosts the leading weekly national radio program for the US Cooperative community. He's a general partner in Everything.coop Communications, LLC, a media company that promotes cooperative business models by providing education and resources specifically for under-resourced Americans and their communities. Vernon has significant national and international experience in various business activities, including France, marketing, sales forecasting, distribution and service, and systems design. He became familiar with cooperative business models as a residential property management company owner and has more than 40 years of experience in property and asset management. Welcome to the show, Vernon. How are you?
Chris, I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, especially now that you're here. It's an honor to have you, sir. Give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
So it's everything.coop, everything.coop.
There you go. Or everything.coop. Or no, hold on. Everything.coop. Never mind. I'm just being funny. Don't do that, people. It's co-op. Co-op. Give us a 30,000 overview of what you guys do there at Everything Co-op Communications.
So I got my MBA out of Stanford, and every decision was made on what's the highest rate of return on investment for the shareholder. And I didn't like it at the time, but I couldn't articulate it until I learned about co-ops as I was managing them and watching everyday people run a business and do it extremely well, get the education they need to run a business and hold each other and everybody accountable. So I fell in love with this co-op model because it just does a lot for the people that are in it, as opposed to shareholders that may not even live in a community. And it benefits the community and families in those communities.
There you go. So you go through all that stuff and help people. And what made you prompt you to start the radio show and then eventually the podcast? And how does that work?
So I was the president of the National Association of Housing Co-ops, and I had two older gentlemen, Herb Fisher, a lawyer out of Chicago, and Roger Wilcox. Roger was in his 90s and Herb was in his 80s at the time. And they kept telling me that if developers would build co-ops and people would buy them. And I listened to that for a while, but I put my marketing hat on and said, people just don't understand co-ops. So if people demanded housing co-ops, then developers would build them and then they would buy them. And so I started going around being on radio shows. And I was on a radio show called the Thornton Business Hour. And the person in charge of the station came out and said, you should have your own show. That was June 11 years ago. And we were only going to do it for the month of October, which is co-op month. And that year, but I liked it, people liked it, and we've been doing it now for almost 11 years.
Wow. And then you convert it into the podcast. Is it entitled the same on the podcast? What is it entitled on the podcast thing? Is it the same? Yeah. Okay, so that makes it easy to take and do. It's so funny, all the different business things that are out there. How did you get started in this business? Tell us how you were growing up, how you were influenced, et cetera, et cetera.
So I was born in New York City. My parents met there, World War II. They were both World War II vets. But my father was from West Virginia, so we moved to Bluefield, West Virginia, where I grew up. And, we live there was a lot of cooperation, people working together. I remember a group of us got together, dug out a hill, and made a basketball court. So we worked together, and that was good. We integrated in 1955. Went through junior high, middle school, high school, and majority white schools, and then went to Bluefield State College, which was historically black college. Never learned anything about co-ops on that education. Taught a year, then I went to Penn State and got a master's in math, taught 2 years, and went to Stanford and got an MBA, and then worked for Cummins Engine Company out of Indiana, and then ran a distributorship for them in Puerto Rico. Then I came to DC, worked for Howard and ran their MBA program a couple of years, but I taught marketing there. And then I started my property management business.
Wow.
That led me to co-ops.
There you go. So define what a co-op is for people. Let's get a breakdown, lay a foundation on the meaning of that as you describe it.
A co-op, as I describe it is a business created by its members for the benefit of its members.
Ah.
Okay. And there are basically 4 types of co-ops. It's if the business is owned and controlled by the employee, it's called a worker co-op, and therefore you can have any business you can think of. If the business is owned and controlled by the people that uses those products or services, it's called a consumer. They consume the products or services. And there you have credit unions, housing co-ops, rural electric co-ops, or consumer co-ops, REI, that a lot of people know about, recreation equipment. Then there's 2 more that a lot of farmers use. One is called a purchasing co-op, where a bunch of farmers come together and buy in bulk, and normally they create a business that buys in bulk, and therefore they get a better product at a lower price. And then farmers and other people are beginning to do that also, creating purchasing co-ops. Ace Hardware is a purchasing co-op.
Oh, really?
All those hardware dealers belong to Ace, which buys and warehouses nails and stuff, so they can compete against the big box stores.
Oh, wow. That's why Ace has stayed around all these years.
Yes. Yeah.
Huh.
Marketing co-ops are co-ops that individuals or businesses, again, farmers, will come together and create a business to market their products. So a farmer can therefore spend their time growing whatever they grow, and then they have another company they can send their milk to, or cows to, or eggs to.
Like farmer co-ops, yeah.
And those are marketing co-ops, or sometimes they're called producers. Cap Creamery is an example of that. They take the milk and they make cheese and cottage cheese. But there's all kinds of, I'm just trying to think of, I used to, I just had a brain. There's all kinds of farmer co-ops. Let me just leave it at that.
There you go. Yeah, and so when you do your radio show, when you do your podcast, when you do your consulting, I imagine you do consulting for this as well, coaching or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah. When you do that, are you usually helping people know how to navigate the ones they have currently set up better? Or are you doing them to help them, show them ways that they can benefit by setting it up and making things work?
Most of what I do is I help people to figure out how to do it better. I do a lot of training in financial management. I don't do as much in creating them. There are people around that help people to create. There's co-op development centers. Most of them are financed by Department of Ag, and they're on rural, but sometimes they're in urban areas also, that helps people to start co-ops and figure out how to make sure that they're successful.
There you go. Now, it seems to me that a lot of co-ops, or some co-ops, like, for example, the farmers co-ops, these are technically, at one time, they were probably competitors, right? So they were all competing for business and distribution, but by seeing the vision of co-opting up and working together instead of competing each other, they found that they had a more powerful sort of lobby or conglomerate. Correct? Is that a good analysis?
We can get you into this world too. That's excellent. That's exactly what happens. Co-ops are operated by values and principles. Okay. And one of the principles is cooperation among co-ops. and co-ops end up helping each other. Another principle, which is the one I liked first, was the fifth principle, is education, training, and information. So co-ops are always training each other on best principles, best ways of doing businesses, best practices. And they share information more than compete. It's more of working together. And this is this cooperation among co-ops. But you should also have credit unions helping housing co-ops, and housing co-ops might help a food co-op. Food co-ops could be either owned by the employees or owned by the consumers. They were mostly started with owned by the consumer. Yeah.
There you go. And so I know UPS used to be employee owned, but is that an employee owned company that's not really a co-op? Union Pacific or United Parcel Service? 90%
sure is not a co-op. It may be an ESOP, which is another form of employee stock ownership, an employee ownership model, but I'm 90% sure it's not a co-op.
There you go. If you're out there listening in the field, does this only pertain to like certain businesses, or can a lot of businesses pull this off in working with their competitors and creating co-ops?
So right now, baby boomers, there's something like own 60% of small businesses, and they are a lot of times they don't have a succession plan. And so these turning into a employee owned, either a co-op or ESOP, turning into an employee owned is a great way of the business owner getting some of the asset value out of the business. Mm-hmm. I like co-ops. If you've got a business and the employees start owning it and making decisions, they normally make better decisions when they are working together. These employees are in the world, out on the front line doing the work. Mm-hmm. So they understand the business and getting that information back to the decision table. Mm-hmm. That's why co-ops, for the most part, if a co-op is started today, 10 years from now, 90% of them are still in business. But if it's a capitalistic business, 90% of them are out of business. Mm-hmm. Because people are working together, helping each other, and it's for the community, and the community rallies around them in bad times.
I would imagine that, the big boxing of America, the warehousing big boxing of America had made it, really was destructive to Main Street and small players and medium-sized players as well. And so I imagine co-opting is probably the best way to compete with that craziness. It could be the Walmarts, the Home Depots, all that sort of stuff.
Oh, I absolutely think so. I think co-ops is the answer to combat the big box stores, because they do go in and they just mess up downtown, they mess up Main Street, take all of the business away. And the small hardware stores go out of business with Home Depot and Lowe's and all of those different places. So they have to compete. A lot of times when they're buying products, if they're buying small amounts, so they pay a higher price. Mm-hmm. If they can get into an Ace hardware, and that's what happens to Ace a lot of time, is family-owned hardware stores that would become a member of Ace, and then they can buy. They have the option of buying from Ace or buying outside. Mm-hmm. Right? So they can get things, and they can compete then against the big box stores.
Yeah. And, we've had with coaches, a lot of coaches compete with each other in the coaching market. We've had people on the show, they've created coaching conglomerates. I don't know if everyone has a vote, but they'll create websites for directories and they just kind of learn promoting others raises their promotional level, their awareness level of people seeing them, and a rising tide lifts all boats, basically. I guess that's technically the whole concept of co-op.
Like I said, we can get you. I'm a see if I can get you involved in this co-op world, because it. That's exactly what happens.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Maybe we should get all the podcasts together, and we should all, work together instead of. We don't really fight each other. I don't know. I don't really fight podcasts. Like I mean, to me, rising tide lifts all boats. The better the podcasting has been for everyone, the more people are listening to podcasts as opposed to, I don't know, whatever they should be listening to.
Good podcast.
Yeah, good podcast. Yeah, so it's definitely helped the podcasting business. It's helped my business. It's helped bring more listeners. But yeah, I can't compete with if they're an NFL star hosting a podcast or if they're a movie star Hollywood hosting a podcast. I can't compete with that. I can bring them on my show, but I can't compete with that. If Oprah wants to start a show, she's going to have 24 million members of her audience overnight. Where we're still trying to get to 24 members in our audience, 24 million members in our audience that listen to the podcast every day. Working on people. We're at 23 million, I think, something like that.
Oh, fantastic.
We're in the millions, so that's all that matters.
I'm in the thousands, so I've got a ways to go. Thank you.
24 million is, but she's Oprah. What are you going to do? You can't compete with that. So maybe we should all bind together and fight Oprah. We should all the podcasts should get together and we'll just go to war with Oprah and talk shit about her. No, I'm just kidding. Well, don't do that.
I think another way of doing it is see if we can get Oprah included into the co-op world or working together so we can live all tied up.
Yeah, we can get Oprah to just give us all cars, man.
Yeah.
You get a car and your podcast gets a car and your podcast gets a car. I like this idea. See, this is why you're the pro at this. So what are some other aspects? What are some of the challenges you run into with co-ops? Is there maybe some, because sometimes people don't get along well.
So I found that my mind went to ticking. And so not only is it Cabot Creamery in terms of marketing co-ops, but Land O'Lakes, Ocean Spray.
Oh, that's right, Land O'Lakes.
Okay. There's a co-op in Pittsburgh called Ujamaa that are Black females that are artists. Are beginning to use co-ops because they have a storefront where they sell their jewelry and paintings and clothing, which individual artists couldn't do, and they have a web page presence. Now, with having said that, I forgot your question.
I was saying, what are some issues that happen with co-ops? Like, sometimes everyone doesn't get along. How do you navigate those things?
That's the hard part of co-ops. As a property manager, I found that most co-ops, they flourished and people work really well together and so forth. But if you got a president often it would be the president of the board that greedy. They're greedy for power or money. Okay.
You mean there's a different way not to be greedy than power for money?
Those are the two things that most people want. Power and or money, and sometimes it's the power so they can get the money. But okay.
Where you get the money and you get the power, and then you get the women. Wait, is that from Scarface, the movie?
Okay.
Is that a line from Scarface? First you get the money.
That is the problem with co-ops. So the secret of it is it's finding those people as soon as you can and following the bylaws and the rules of cooperation so you can get them out as soon as you can. As a property manager, I found it difficult because I wanted to do things according to federal laws, DC, I'm in Washington, DC laws, and then the bylaws of the co-op in that order. And so when I found somebody that was not following the laws, it was normally because they wanted something. And too often it was that power. So it is as soon as you can. And I would have to go and get help. National Co-op Bank had loans out and they would come in. They were the easiest to help sort that out. HUD, a couple of times I was able to get them to come in to help because they had the loan or the mortgage or they had some kind of a subsidy program in it. But that is in fact the hardest part of co-ops. When things go wrong, they are big. Most of them are highly successful and work extremely well. But when they're wrong, you gotta get in there quickly and get that out, nudge it out, get it out.
There you go. So what's the best way to go about that? Is that you need to have really thick rules and regulations, and you need to really you need to make sure that, there's guidelines and penalties. I learned over business of time that my rules and regulations and manuals just kept getting thicker and thicker, and contracts kept getting thicker and thicker as time went by.
Yes. Yeah. But it is really knowing what's in the contract, really knowing what's in the rules, and then holding people to it.
Yeah.
You don't just let things fall. And it's so much easier either not catching it or seeing it and say, oh, that's not that bad. It won't be that bad. It'll go away. But that stuff normally builds. It snowballs.
Yeah, it normally snowballs, which is kind of an issue. So, yeah, I imagine you just have to have good controls, probably large councils, right, where there's maybe a board that makes a lot of decisions as opposed to one guy, maybe.
So in a co-op, the members elect a board of directors, 5, 7, 9 members, and that board then has to implement the bylaws. And where it goes wrong is if people on that board won't follow the bylaws, okay, or you get somebody elected to president again that doesn't want to follow because they want the money or the power.
There you go. So you got to have people that are, sort of city councilman type people, maybe. On the thing
I don't know if that's a good one.
Yeah. But power corrupts everybody, I think, when it comes down to it, and money.
If you don't have people that will follow the rules and hold people accountable, and that's what I liked when I first got involved in this, that people were holding each other accountable to pay their mortgage rents, or they call co-op fees, to pick up behind their animals, to whatever it is, okay? But to have classes on what the house rules or the bylaws are for the members and then holding them to it. And it may be $100 fine if they don't, but as soon as you find out that somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do or parking in the wrong place, then you act.
There you go. It sounds like it's fun. It's complicated, but the fact that you can have more lobbyist power, more business power, more buying power, I imagine, for your, if you're having to buy stuff for your inventory or production, to make your widgets, you can buy things cheaper because you're grossing up and basically able to buy in bigger bulk as a co-op. It makes sense. I mean, especially when, these companies, these big box companies you're competing with now have pretty much almost unlimited resources.
But Chris, what I found the biggest benefit of co-ops comes in two flavors. One is the people build up their financial wealth, build up knowledge. Financing is a part of it, but build up financial wealth. But the bigger thing that people build up is self-worth and dignity. When people in a co-op, you have an affordable housing co-op, they come in, too often nobody listens to them. Too often they don't have voice. But when you can help train them to where they have voice, they see they're listened to, they see that their voice will help in making the decisions, they get self-worth and dignity, and that's the biggest piece of it. And that follows all the way through from the individual to the family to the community.
Wow.
So that to me is what I have found is the bigger benefit is the financial wealth. It is businesses that really help community, but at individual level, give voice, critical.
There you go. What are some things that the benefits or issues with co-opting we haven't covered or talked about, or questions I haven't asked you?
The benefits, we've talked a lot about the benefits. The only negative that I see is this power grab. The education has to happen. That's the fifth principle of education, training, and information. That has to happen in order for a co-op to work. The other benefit, though, is that we find during the Great Depression, during the Great Recession, that co-ops were more resilient than non-co-ops.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that was the reasons I was telling you earlier, that you have the people that own it they'll do things like take a 10% overall cut in pay. They'll decide to, and instead of letting somebody go, we'll all take a reduction. You have the co-op is in the community, and when it's in the community and the community knows about it, the community supports it. And they support the co-op before they support the non-co-ops.
So you might shop at you opposed to the Walmart.
Yeah. And to share the overall, the ethical values of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others.
There you go.
You got the values of self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity. It's always interesting to me. It starts with self-help and ends with solidarity, that people are working together. And the individual is trying to figure out how do I work so that me and my family are better, but how do we do that together? And you build community.
There you go.
I see the benefits way outweighing the negatives. When the negative happens, though, it's terrible, particularly if it's not cut quickly.
Yeah. Imagine, like I said, lots of rules and regulations, oversight, all those sort of things that you find, you have to do in an organization, and you've got to anticipate for the issues. And do you find you come in a lot to clean up sort of issues like this where a community's having a challenge and they're trying to figure out how to resolve it?
No, I don't do that work. There are some people out that does that work, but that's not the work that I do. So no, I don't come in.
There you go.
When you go, there's a conference called Up and Coming, and that's for people that are starting food co-ops. They come to this conference. And what you see is the older food co-ops that may have started in the 70s coming in and helping the ones that have an idea of a co-op, one that's going to come down the road. So people are working together. And that's the part of co-ops that I love, is how people share information. There's some funding co-ops, or the co-ops that fund co-ops. Their losses is around 1% to 3%.
Oh, wow.
Very, 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 very minimal for all of the reasons that we've already talked about.
So they probably don't go out of business as much because, if you're an individual business, you have a lot of high chance of failure, especially when you're new or market conditions change. Probably if you're in a co-op, you have a better survival rate, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was saying that 10 years from now, those co-ops that started today, 90% of them will be in business. Now, what you'll find out, Chris, is as people are learning and putting it all together and trying to figure out how to work together, they may decide not to start the co-op. Okay? But those that get started have a high chance of success.
So what's the best way people can get advice from you, find out more from you on how to onboard with some of your consulting and learn more about co-ops and options they have?
So you can go to Everything.coop, or I am also a consultant for Illuminate. That's lighting the path together. Co-illuminate. We work together to illuminate the path. .coop.
There you go. And people can listen to the podcast, et cetera, et cetera. And final thoughts as we go out on the show.
If you really want to be successful and you want your family to be successful, you want your community to be successful, then look at starting a co-op or being a patronage to a co-op, buy from a food co-op, do your business with co-ops. It's a way to really help the community and help the individual.
There you go. And survivalship, too. I love the survivalship aspect of it. There's so many companies that have started that they just didn't survive, partially because we had too many things going on, too many plates spinning at one time. But, they just didn't hit. And then I had companies that did hit and did very well for 20 years. And then, the 2008 crisis came.
Yeah.
You can laugh about it now. And then I'm going to go cry after the show. Anyway, no, I'm just kidding. I'm over it. But I think I am. I don't know. Do I sound like I'm over it? I don't sound like I'm over it. But I'm being funny. So thank you very much, Vernon, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. And I'd love to have you on the show, and I want to get you to be a cooperator. You
Let's chat about it.
You have the foundation.
You know what, though? I don't work along with other people, though. That's my issue. That's why I'm an entrepreneur, because I know. So there you go. Anyway, Vernon, thank you very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. Thanks to our audience for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss, one on the TikTok, and all those crazy places on the internet. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.